We left my stupid husband miles away as a joke so I could have a secret weekend and slept with his brother. He returned, froze every penny, and had us both trespassed from our own house while I discovered I was pregnant with no place to go. I called him stupid for 3 years. Not to his face. But to my friends. To his brother. To my sister over wine on Tuesday nights when she asked how things were going and I said, "Fine, you know how Garrett is," and we both laughed because we both knew how Garrett was. Steady. Quiet. Methodical. The kind of man who read instruction manuals and kept receipts and never raised his voice. I called that stupid. I called that boring. I told Ren, his brother, that marrying Garrett was like marrying a filing cabinet. I want to be honest about that. I want you to understand exactly the kind of person I was before I tell you what happened. Because what happened makes no sense unless you understand that I genuinely believed I was the smart one. The interesting one. The one with the instincts and the spark and the ability to read a room. I believed that for 6 years of marriage. I believed it right up until the moment I was standing outside my own front door with a pregnancy test in my purse and a trespass notice in my hand and nowhere to go. Garrett wasn't stupid. I was. My name is Lena Marsh. I'm 32. Was a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized events company. I say was because things have changed significantly in the past 7 months in ways I am still processing. Garrett Marsh is 35. He's a civil engineer. He designs infrastructure. Roads. Drainage systems. Retention walls. The things nobody thinks about until they fail. He's been doing it for 11 years. He is methodical and precise and patient in ways I spent 6 years mistaking for dullness. His brother is Ren Marsh. 31. He does social media consulting. Which mostly means he posts things and gets paid occasionally and borrows money regularly. He borrowed $3,400 from Garrett over 2 years. Garrett tracked every dollar in a spreadsheet I found later and didn't understand at the time. Here is what I did. Garrett and I had a lake house. 2.5 hours from our primary residence. We bought it 3 years into the marriage. It was Garrett's idea. He said it would appreciate. He was right. It appreciated $140,000 in 4 years. At the time I thought the lake house was boring too. Trees and water and Garrett reading on the porch. I wanted dinners and events and the kind of weekends that felt like something. I had been seeing Ren for 4 months. Not seriously. That's what I told myself. Not seriously, just something exciting, just something that felt like a door instead of a wall. I know how that sounds. I knew how it sounded then. I told myself it didn't matter because Garrett would never find out and Ren was exciting in ways Garrett wasn't, and I deserved to feel something that wasn't predictable. I planned the weekend on a Tuesday. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. The planning. Because it wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a Tuesday afternoon at my desk with my calendar open, moving pieces around deliberately. The plan was simple. Tell Garrett we were all going to the lake house for the weekend. Friday through Sunday. Me, Garrett, Ren, and our friends Petra and Dom. Make it a group trip. Normal? Then on Friday afternoon, when we'd all driven out there, I would tell Garrett that Petra had accidentally given him the wrong address for the secondary parking lot where he was supposed to pick up the extra coolers from Dom's truck. The address I gave him was 34 miles away. A hardware store parking lot. By the time he figured it out and drove back, Ren and I would have the evening. I told Petra the plan. She said, "That's mean, Lena." I said, "It's a joke. He'll laugh when he finds out." She said, "Will he?" I said, "He's Garrett. He'll find it funny eventually." He did not find it funny. Garrett left at 4:17 p.m. on Friday to find the parking lot that didn't exist. I watched him back out of the driveway from the kitchen window. Steady. Unhurried. Garrett never hurried. I turned away from the window before he reached the road. What happened next is mine to carry. I'm not going to dress it up or soften it. Ren was there. The evening happened. Petra and Dom made themselves absent with what I now recognize was the specific discomfort of people who know something is wrong and have decided not to be in the room when it lands. Garrett was gone for 2 hours and 43 minutes. I know the exact time because I found out later he had tracked it. He drove to the hardware store parking lot. Realized immediately there was no secondary lot, no Dom, no coolers. He sat in that parking lot for 14 minutes. I know because his phone's GPS logged it. He was sitting in a hardware store parking lot 34 miles away and was running a calculation. He drove back. He didn't call. He didn't text. He drove back in silence and arrived at the lake house at 7:02 p.m. I heard the door. I assumed it was Petra and Dom coming back from wherever they'd gone. I was wrong. Garrett walked into the kitchen. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked past me. Then he said, "Where's Ren?" I said, "He went for a walk." Garrett said, "How long ago?" I said, "About 20 minutes." He said, "Okay." Then he went to the bedroom. The door didn't slam. It closed. That quiet close was worse than any slam I've ever heard. I stood in the kitchen for 11 minutes. I counted. I didn't know what to do. I expected him to come back out. To yell. To cry. To demand an explanation. He didn't come out. I finally knocked on the door. I said, "Garrett. Can we talk?" He said, "Not tonight." That was it. Not tonight. I stood outside that door and I thought, he doesn't know. He suspects something but he doesn't know. Because Garrett was calm. Garrett was always calm. I convinced myself that calm meant uninformed. I was wrong again. The rest of the weekend was quiet. Garrett was present and polite in the way that people are present and polite when they are doing something else entirely in their head. He made coffee in the morning. He said good morning. He drove home Sunday afternoon. He asked if I wanted to stop for gas and I said no and he said okay. We got home Sunday at 6 p.m. Garrett went to his office. I heard him on the phone for about 40 minutes. I thought he was calling a friend. I thought maybe he was venting. Processing. Doing the Garrett thing where he dealt with things internally before he was ready to speak. He wasn't venting. He was calling his attorney. Monday morning I woke up at 7:30. Garrett had already left. There was coffee made, which he always did. There was no note, which he never left anyway. Normal Monday. I went to the grocery store at 10 a.m. My debit card declined on a $43 purchase. I thought it was a bank error. I called the bank from the parking lot. The customer service rep said, "There is a freeze on this account pending a legal hold." I said, "What legal hold?" She said, "I can only tell you the account has been frozen. You'll need to contact the account holder of record." I was the account holder of record. I was also apparently not the one who had frozen it. I called Garrett. He answered on the second ring. I said, "Garrett, my card was declined. There's a freeze on our account. Do you know anything about this?" He said, "Yes." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "It means I froze the accounts. All of them. Joint checking, joint savings, the household account. I spoke with an attorney Sunday night. The freeze is legal and documented. You'll receive paperwork within 48 hours. I said, "Garrett. What are you doing?" He said, "I'm doing what needs to be done." Then he said, "I'd suggest you arrange somewhere to stay for the next few weeks while the legal process moves forward. And I'd suggest you do it today." I said, "What are you talking about? I live in our house." He said, "That's being addressed. You'll receive documentation." He hung up. I sat in the grocery store parking lot for 22 minutes. I called Ren. He didn't answer. I called him again. He didn't answer. I texted him. No response. I called my sister. She answered immediately and I told her what had happened and she said, "Oh, Lena." And the way she said it, not surprised, just tired, told me that my sister had seen this coming in a way I hadn't. I drove home. Our house. The one we bought together 4 years ago. Garrett's name was on the mortgage. Both our names were on the deed. I had a right to be there. I knew I had a right to be there. I drove home and let myself in with my key and stood in the kitchen and thought, he can't do this. He can freeze the accounts but he can't remove me from my own home. The documentation arrived Tuesday. Not 48 hours. Less than 24. It was a packet from a law firm I'd never heard of. Inside was a divorce petition, a temporary restraining order related to marital assets, and a document I had to read 3 times before I understood what I was looking at. It was a property agreement. Signed by me. From 4 years ago when we bought the house. I remembered signing it. It was in a stack of closing documents. Garrett had handed me the stack and pointed to the tabs and I had signed where the tabs were because that's what you do at a closing. You sign where the tabs are and you trust the person who prepared the stack. One of those documents was an agreement that in the event of documented marital misconduct by either party, the non-offending spouse had the right to petition for immediate exclusive occupancy of the marital home pending divorce proceedings. Garrett had documented the misconduct. The GPS log from the lake house. A statement from Petra, my friend, who had given a written statement to Garrett's attorney. Timestamps. The 2 hours and 43 minutes he was gone. What he found when he returned. His attorney had filed for exclusive occupancy Monday morning. The same morning I was in the grocery store parking lot with a declined debit card. He had filed it while I was trying to buy groceries. The court granted it Tuesday at 2 p.m. I found out at 4 p.m. when I was still in the house and a sheriff's deputy arrived at the front door. I want to describe this moment carefully because I think it's important. A sheriff's deputy. At my front door. With a court order for exclusive occupancy granted to Garrett Marsh. Requiring me to vacate the premises within 4 hours with personal belongings only. No furniture. No shared items. Personal clothing and documents. I said, "This is my house too." The deputy said, "Ma'am, the court has granted temporary exclusive occupancy to the other party. I have a valid court order. You have 4 hours." I called Ren. He answered this time. I told him what was happening. I said, "I need somewhere to stay." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Lena. My landlord called me this morning. He said my lease isn't being renewed. Garrett owns the building." I said, "What?" Ren said, "Garrett owns the building I live in. Through some LLC?" I didn't know. My landlord told me this morning. He said the new owner, the LLC, has decided not to renew my lease and I have 30 days. Garrett owned Ren's building. I didn't know. I didn't know because I had never asked about his investments. I had never been interested in his spreadsheets and his portfolios and his methodical, quiet financial decisions. I had called it boring. I had called him stupid. He had owned his brother's building for 2 years and neither of us had known. I stood in my kitchen for 4 more hours, and I understood for the first time that the man I had called a filing cabinet had been filing things I never bothered to read. I packed 2 bags. Clothes. Documents. The things that were mine and only mine. I left at 7:48 p.m. The deputy watched from the driveway. I did not look at him when I left. I did not look at the house. I looked at my car and I put my bags in the back and I drove to my sister's apartment. My sister had a pull-out couch. She had a 1-bedroom apartment and a pull-out couch and she opened the door when I knocked and she didn't say "I told you so" and she didn't say anything about Garrett or Ren or the house. She just pulled out the couch and got sheets from the closet and said, "You want tea or wine?" I said wine. She said, "Thought so." I found out I was pregnant 11 days later. I had been tired. I had thought it was stress. I went to a drugstore at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday and bought 2 tests and sat on my sister's bathroom floor and looked at 2 pink lines and understood that my situation, which I had already thought was as bad as it could be, had a dimension I had not accounted for. I called Garrett. He didn't answer. I called again. He didn't answer. I texted, "I need to talk to you. It's important." He responded 4 hours later through his attorney. A text from a number I didn't have, identifying itself as correspondence from his legal representation. It said, "Mr. Marsh has been made aware of your message. All communication should be directed through counsel. If you have urgent medical information relevant to the proceedings, please provide documentation to the following address." Documentation. To an address. My husband of 6 years found out I needed to talk to him urgently and he responded through a legal address. I got a lawyer. I had to borrow money from my sister to pay the retainer because my accounts were frozen and my cards didn't work, and I had $340 in personal cash I'd had in my wallet on Monday morning. My lawyer's name was Simone Grant. She was direct and efficient, and the first thing she said after I told her everything was, "How much do you know about his assets?" I said, "Not much." She said, "That's going to be a problem." It was a problem. Because Garrett, the man I had called a filing cabinet, had been filing things for 11 years. The house. The Lake House. The LLC that owned Ren's building. 2 other LLCs with commercial property holdings I had never heard of. Index funds. A brokerage account. A pension from his first engineering firm. 11 years of steady, quiet, invisible accumulation by a man I had dismissed as boring. Simone spent 3 weeks building a picture of what Garrett actually owned. The picture that emerged was of a man worth approximately $2.3 million in combined assets. Not rich. Not flashy. Not the kind of wealth that announces itself. The kind that sits in spreadsheets and compounds quietly and doesn't tell you it's there until someone starts looking. I hadn't looked. For 6 years I had not looked because I was not interested in spreadsheets. The baby was Garrett's. The timing was clear. There had been nothing with Ren that could have changed the timeline. Simone filed for paternity establishment as part of the divorce proceedings. Garrett did not contest it. He requested a DNA test, which confirmed 99.98% paternity. He didn't fight the result. He didn't disappear. He just had it documented. That is the kind of man Garrett is. He doesn't fight what's true. He just makes sure the truth has paperwork. Child support was calculated based on his income and assets. His salary from the engineering firm, $138,000 per year. The asset income from the LLCs was more complicated. Simone argued for inclusion. Garrett's attorney argued for exclusion. The final calculation landed at $2,400 per month. The house. We both had our names on the deed. Simone filed to contest the exclusive occupancy order. Garrett's attorney had the misconduct documentation and the signed property agreement from closing. The agreement I had signed without reading. The court found the agreement valid. Exclusive occupancy remained with Garrett through the divorce proceedings. The divorce took 14 months. I spent 9 of those months on my sister's pull-out couch. The last 5 in a one-bedroom apartment I rented with the first 2 months of child support that had started coming through. Ren. I should tell you about Ren. Ren lost his apartment 30 days after Garrett's LLC declined to renew his lease. He called me when he was packing. He said, "This is insane, Lena. Your husband is insane." I said, "He's not insane." He knew. He's known for a while. Ren said, "How long do you think he knew?" I said, "I don't know. Maybe the whole time." I've thought about that since. The spreadsheet. The LLC. The property agreement and the closing documents. The lake house where he drove 34 miles and sat in a hardware store parking lot for 14 minutes. I think Garrett knew things I didn't know he knew. I think he filed information the way he filed everything. Quietly. Methodically. Without telling me. I think the 14 minutes in the parking lot weren't confusion. I think they were confirmation. Ren is in a studio apartment now. $950 a month. He lost 2 consulting clients after the story got around. This is a mid-sized city, news travels. His income last year was $22,000. He has not paid back the $3,400 he borrowed from Garrett. I know because Garrett's attorney included it in the divorce asset documentation as a marital debt owed to the household. Garrett is still in the house. I drove past it once. Not deliberately, it's near a grocery store I used to avoid and went to by accident. The lawn was cut. The lights were on. There was a car in the driveway I didn't recognize. I didn't slow down. The baby. I have a daughter. Her name is June. She is 4 months old and she has Garrett's eyes and Garrett's way of looking at things steadily without moving. She goes to Garrett every other weekend for the custody arrangement. He picks her up and he is on time, always on time, and he has a car seat installed in a car I don't recognize and he says hello to me politely at the door and he takes June and he brings her back on Sunday evening, on time, always on time, without drama, without anger, without a single word that isn't logistical. He has never once been late. He has never missed a payment. He has never sent a message that wasn't through his attorney or a logistical text about June. He has not yelled or cried or demanded I explain myself. He has just continued. Steady. Methodical. On time. I stand at the door when he returns June on Sundays, and I watch him buckle her in and I think about all the times I called him stupid. All the times I said filing cabinet to my sister over wine. All the times I told Ren that Garrett would never figure it out because Garrett wasn't the type. Garrett was exactly the type. I just didn't understand what type that was. The property agreement I signed at closing. Page 7 of 22 pages. Clause 4, subsection B. In the event of documented marital misconduct by either party, the non-offending spouse retains the right to petition for immediate exclusive occupancy. I signed it at a table in a title company office on a Thursday afternoon with a pen that had the title company's logo on it. I signed it because there was a tab and Garrett had pointed to the tab and I trusted him. I signed my own exit paperwork at the same table where I signed my mortgage. Simone asked me once, "Do you think he planned it?" I said, "I think he prepared for it." She said, "What's the difference?" I said, "Planning means he expected me to fail. Preparing means he made sure he was ready if I did." I think he was ready for a long time. I think the spreadsheets and the LLCs and the property agreements and the $3,400 loan documentation were the work of a man who understood that things fail and that when they fail you want to have built something that holds. He built something that held. I just didn't know I was part of the structure he was accounting for. My sister doesn't say I told you so. She brings wine on Tuesday nights and we sit on the couch in my one-bedroom apartment and sometimes June is asleep in the next room and sometimes she's with Garrett and it's quiet. My sister asks how I'm doing and I say, "Figuring it out." She says, "That's enough." Maybe it is. The child support clears on the 1st of every month. Garrett has not missed one. Not one. In 9 months of payments since June was born and the support order was active, he has not been one day late. Not $1 short. Every 1st of the month. Like a man who understands exactly what he owes and pays it without being asked twice. I spent 6 years thinking I was the smart one. I understand now that intelligence isn't what I thought it was. I thought it was quick. Loud. Instinctive. The kind that reads a room and makes people laugh and moves fast. Garrett's kind is different. His kind is slow. Patient. Invisible. The kind that reads documents and keeps receipts and sits in a parking lot for 14 minutes confirming what it already suspects. The kind that builds things so carefully that when they need to hold weight, they hold it. The kind that loves you well enough to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best, and never telling you which one it was doing. I called that stupid for 3 years. The pull-out couch at my sister's. The deputy at my door. The pregnancy test on the bathroom floor. The $340 in my wallet on a Monday morning. That's what smart looks like when it runs out of road. I know the difference now. I just wish I'd learned it from a book instead of from a trespass notice.